Welcome back, everyone. Let's get right into it. Today, we're breaking down day 2 of the highly anticipated 1996 Tupac Shakur murder trial, the state versus Dwayne Keefe Davis. We're looking at this trial strictly through the lens of the prosecution's element-building framework. We want to see exactly how they're constructing this case, literally block by block, against the only person ever charged in this historic crime. It's a really fascinating look at legal strategy, and we're going to unpack the evidence exactly as the jury saw it. Okay, let's dive into this. Think of this as our legal docket for today's explainer to systematically review the evidence. First up, proving a homicide. Then we'll look at the fatal wounds, the hotel altercation, the shots fired on Flamingo, and finally, the decades-old investigation. Section 1, proving a homicide, the element-building framework. Now, before the prosecution can even begin to point fingers at Dwayne Davis, they face a massive foundational hurdle. They literally have to build this murder case from the ground up. You might be asking, so what? I mean, we all know Tupac was killed. Why spend hours in court on this? Well, in a court of law, assumptions mean absolutely nothing. Zero. Prosecutors have to spend hours legally cementing every single element of an intentional homicide. They've got to firmly plant step 1 and step 2 into the official court record using undeniable medical science, long before they can even attempt step 3 to connect the crime to the defendant. So to do this, the state called up Dr. Lisa Gavin. She's a forensic pathologist and medical examiner for Clark County. She reviewed those original 1996 records and unequivocally testified to the manner of death. Her conclusion? Homicide. And she defined it in the simplest medical and legal terms for the jury: death at the hands of another. Boom. That establishes our foundational legal element. This was, for sure, an intentional killing. Section 2, the fatal wounds. Mapping the autopsy evidence. As Dr. Gavin started walking the jury through the autopsy photos, man, the heavy reality of the trial really set in. Several members of Tupac's family actually had to get up and leave the courtroom. Now, what's really interesting about this mapping is the precise, absolutely devastating pathway of that first fatal bullet as Dr. Gavin described it. Entering just below the right armpit, the bullet traveled straight across the right lung space. This caused immense internal bleeding. We're talking roughly 2 liters of blood filling his chest cavity. Doctors performed an emergency thoracotomy incision, essentially cutting into the side of the chest, and put in a chest tube to drain the blood. They ultimately had to remove the lung to try and save him, before that bullet finally came to rest in the sternal notch, right near the collarbones. The trajectory of this second fatal bullet? Equally catastrophic. It entered the outside of his right thigh and traveled upward, right into the abdomen, severely damaging his intestines. Dr. Gavin testified that while surgeons were operating to remove a portion of those damaged intestines, they actually recovered another projectile entirely. But here is where the legal friction really sparks. The prosecution argues that these autopsy records completely cement the physical facts of the murder. However, the defense, led by attorney Michael Samp, immediately went to work on cross-examination. He hammered home that Dr. Gavin was not the original medical examiner. That was Dr. Jordan, who has since passed away. The defense pointed out she's relying on 30-year-old Polaroids and records she didn't even keep herself. They're arguing that relying on decades-old, potentially incomplete records from a deceased examiner, well, that's grounds for reasonable doubt. Section 3. The hotel altercation. Establishing the motive. Let's shift the timeline to a bit earlier that fateful night. We're heading over to the MGM Grand. This is the exact moment the prosecution claims sparked the entire motive for the murder. The state called MGM investigator Michael Ingram to authenticate these grainy, reused VHS surveillance tapes. And they showed a crucial confrontation: Tupac's entourage allegedly attacking Keith D's nephew, Orlando Anderson, right by the elevator core, before Anderson took off toward the casino's Lion entrance. The prosecution is hoping this proves the beating happened on camera, laying out a crystal-clear motive for retaliation. Now, the response to this beating is highly contested. Responding Officer Sergeant Kenneth Rios testified that Orlando Anderson completely refused medical help and flat-out refused to file a police report. For the prosecution, this implies a plan for street justice, right? Like, they didn't want the cops involved because they wanted to handle it themselves. But look at the defense's counter-argument. They aggressively questioned Sergeant Rios, pointing out that he didn't write his report immediately that night, and he never even requested additional surveillance video from the casino. Once again, they are pushing this narrative of sloppy, incomplete police work. Section 4. Shots fired on Flamingo. The eyewitness chaos. Next, we get an eyewitness perspective of the actual chaos from William Hyde. He was a security guard at the Maxim Hotel, who ironically was just up on the third-floor parking garage investigating stolen Dodge Caravans when the whole world stopped. His dramatic memory really brings the scene to life. He ran over to the barrier wall overlooking Koval Boulevard after hearing a bunch of pops, and he testified to hearing somewhere between 9 and 15 shots in a series. Looking over that barrier, Hyde witnessed this massive, fleeing caravan in the traffic lanes, pulling a U-turn on Flamenco to head west. He detailed the exact lineup of cars: a white Dodge Stratus, the black BMW, a Lexus, an unidentified dark car, and a white Chevy Suburban. But most importantly, he observed people actually standing outside the vehicles. This included a young, well-dressed man in a bright white three-quarter sleeve shirt and a black dress vest, just holding a semi-automatic pistol down by his side. So the crucial point is how both sides are utilizing this dramatic testimony. The prosecution uses Hyde to establish the chaotic scene, an armed suspect and a fleeing caravan immediately pursued by Metro officers. But the defense? They swiftly countered this. On cross-examination, they emphasized that Hyde never actually wrote his own report that night. He handed his notes off to co-officers. Furthermore, he admitted he only heard the shots. He never actually saw the weapon being fired by that man.
Section 5. The decades-old investigation, the defense's core argument.
We've seen hints of it throughout the trial so far, but this is the defense's overarching core strategy to dismantle the prosecution's foundational evidence. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what they are trying to do. They're heavily leveraging this 30-year paper trail: unverified video timestamps, grainy reused VHS tapes from the MGM, delayed police reports, handed-off security notes, and deceased original witnesses. They are stacking up every single missing detail, every degraded tape, and every handed-off report to cast a massive, cumulative shadow of reasonable doubt over the state's entire narrative. It's basically a masterclass in challenging the chain of evidence, and it leaves us with this massive, lingering question. Can the prosecution truly overcome the immense hurdles of a 30-year-old disorganized paper trail to secure a murder conviction against Dwayne Keefe D. Davis? As they move past these foundational elements and try to connect Davis directly to the crime, the strength of these decades-old facts is going to be tested like never before. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep thinking critically about how evidence is built and exactly how it's dismantled.